Hi, everyone, and welcome to Lurking for Legends, a live video cast where we talk with people from all walks of the publishing industry. I'm Christy Stratus, historical suspense and fantasy author, and my awesome co-hosts are epic fantasy author Richard H. Stevens and science fiction author David M. Kelly. Lurking for Legends is an interactive broadcast, and we encourage viewers to chime in with questions for our guests who will be coming on very shortly, or comment on what you hear in the show. So we'll just go over what we've been doing this week first, and then we will introduce you to our guest. So I don't remember who I started with last time, but how are things going for you, Richard? What have you done this week?
Yeah, they're going very well. I'm still working on When Legends Rise. I'm probably about 5 chapters into the last installment of the High Cliff Guardian series. I can't wait to get this book out because it's got some new, interesting characters in it. I'm loving writing about it. It's nice, after almost a million words, you start to, well, I guess it's not that many words, but after a long time, like, as much as you love your characters, they almost start to get boring to write about it. So I've influxed some brand new characters who are very eclectic, and I'm really enjoying writing with them. It's almost like they're in the room with me as we write. But yeah, so that's what's going on with my writing. And with regards to what's going on this week, actually, Dave is going to be traveling down from his home north of us, and we're going to be doing a book event together with 12 other authors and an illustrator in the little town of St. Jacobs. And St. Jacobs, if you're not familiar with it, is this quaint little village right in the heart of southern Ontario, and it's a tourist mecca for people to come down and do Christmas shopping. There's a bunch of real eclectic stores down there that people like to visit. So hopefully the weather holds for us. It sounds like we might get a bit of rain, and hopefully that doesn't deter anyone or take them out of the Christmas spirit. But if anyone's listening to this and you're in Southern Ontario, come on down to St. Jacobs. We're at the Three Sisters Cultural Center. It's right in the heart of St. Jacobs on the main street on King Street, and there'll be 14 authors and an illustrator there selling and signing their books. And there's so many different genres there: science fiction, fantasy, and children's books, and romance, and just regular good old fiction. So we invite everyone to come down. How about you, Dave?
Sounds like it's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Yeah, it's always fun when you get together with a bunch of other authors. Even if you don't sell a lot of books, it's still nice to hang together.
Oh yeah, definitely.
How about you, Dave? What's new with Dave?
My week has been not very great so far, but I'm just kind of getting on with the same old projects. It's kind of moving steadily along. And yes, I will be visiting you this weekend and sponging off you and eating all your food and drinking all your drinks. And
yeah, you thought your week is bad already. Wait till you get down here. Wait till you see what I got in store for you.
Oh, I can't imagine after the last time.
Yeah, one of my favorite videos. Yeah, I played that a few times.
Don't worry, I won't put on a wig this time.
Oh no. Yeah, you made me put on the wig this time.
As long as there's video running, it's all okay.
Now, how about you, Christy? What's new with Christy?
Yeah, as for me, you guys can probably predict I did post another episode of Corrupted Magic this week, episode 18. Yay! And this one is called Ancient Deceit. And this one's pretty exciting. I mean, a lot of them are, but I try to keep it super exciting with all of them. So Humphrey this time is a witness to Drew Morton, who you guys, if you've been keeping up with it, have already met. He's a master blacksmith and a weapons expert. And he's going to be extracting the history from a dangerous magical mace called, and I'm going to attempt to pronounce it, Skristor. And that is supposed to be Irish. So just pretend it came out really Irish sounding. But anyway, it's an Irish word and the name of this mace that has done a lot of damage to a particular member of the group, Knox, one of the favorite characters I have. So that's what's going on this week. It's going to be, if you are into that kind of stuff, it's really interesting. So in NaNoWriMo, I'm super thrilled. This is my best NaNoWriMo yet, National Novel Writing Month, in case you're not familiar. And so far I've written 22,346 words, which is huge for me. That is enormous in 1 month. So all on Corrupted Magic and a secret side project having to do with the same series. And I've written every day, and that was really all I was trying to do. So I'm really happy with my progress. That's my
congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm never going to make
that's
like
great.
50,000, and I'm not aiming for that. But this is, I usually make it to maybe 10,000 if I'm lucky. So this is more than twice that.
Yeah,
So
I think it's unfortunate that they put that $50,000 word thing in there. I think that really deters a lot of people. Like you say, you've been able to write every day, so I don't think it matters that you hit 50,000 words. I think it matters that you're writing words, and you sound so happy that you've been writing every day. And I think that's what it should all be about. It shouldn't be trying to hit this milestone of 50,000 words. Because, like I say, last year I didn't hit it, and I was so stressed out, it sucked the life right out of me because I was writing words that just to try and hit the 50,000 words, I wasn't enjoying my story at all. So,
if you made it $50,000, it would probably attract more people to it.
Anyway,
definitely.
So on that note,
I agree.
Yeah, on that note, I think we should introduce our guest this week.
All right, our guest for this week, we are excited to have with us John Dyer, and he is a sci-fi and adventure author, and I think he also writes more than that, but those are our two main genres for him. Welcome, John. How are you tonight?
Welcome, John.
Greetings. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Excellent. We're so happy to have you here. So if you could start out by just telling us a little bit about yourself and what you write, that would be great.
Well, I'm a computer scientist. I own a technology consulting company, and we started it back in 86, I guess. And so I have a computing science background. I'm a practical engineer. I've been an enthusiast, a science and technology enthusiast since I was a little kid. And I read science fiction starting at a young age. I started reading the Tom Swift books and the Edgar Rice Burroughs stories. And my dad read science fiction. My dad was an electrical engineer. And so I kind of grew up on James Blish and Philip K. Dick and golden age of science fiction writers. And so, as everybody does, I had a life and I had a work life, and that pretty much consumed all my energy up until I hit my 50s, and the business was doing so well that I started taking a look at retiring early, which I did do. I retired at 55, and so as you can imagine, I've been retired 17 years now, so I needed something to do. And I've always been a do-it-yourselfer. I build things, I make things. I had a boat that I rebuilt 5 times, and I built a house. I designed and built a house, and I'm the kind of guy who fixes things. And if you go out to my website, you'll see some of the essays that I've written about fixing things, like fixing my waffle iron. I have an essay called Waffled, and I have this semi-professional Belgian waffle maker that I just couldn't let go of. And so when it quit working, I took it apart and repaired it, and I realized that, of course, people don't do that kind of thing, but I do. And so and then I've been a hobby welder for a number of years. And I thought, my mother was a fine artist. She worked in oils and Chinese pen and ink, and she was very talented. And but that hobby filled her life with clutter. And I started thinking, I might be a metal sculptor, perhaps, but that would fill my yard with scrap iron and dinosaurs made from washing machine parts. And then what do you do with that, especially when you die? The poor people that have to come up and clean up after you. And I just didn't think that was the smartest idea. And so, but really, I kind of got forced into being a writer around, and I've always been kind of a daydreamer. And around 1982 or thereabouts, I had a very peculiar dream, and I woke up from it. It was about a 15-second dream, and it was one of those very lucid dreams where you can see your hands, where you're actually operating your own body, seeing out through your own eyes. And it was just a very short clip. And I woke up from it, and it really stuck with me. And I started thinking, what could that possibly have been about. What thing happening in my life could have possibly elucidated such a strange dream? And so I know it sounds kind of peculiar, but for a couple of years, I turned that little 15-second clip around in my head until I decided that there was a story behind it. And that story became my Anye universe novels. And it became the novel that I'm writing right now, that I'm about to launch. So what happened, I sat down to write it, and I got 30,000 words into it. And I realized that I was putting so much backstory in the narrative that I had started the story in the wrong place. And so I stepped back and I said, well, there's got to be another book that comes before this one that explains all these things that I'm referring to in backstory. And so I started writing that book, and about 15,000 words into that book, I said, oh my God, it's happened again. And so I stepped back and I started writing another book, and it happened again. And then I said, okay, what is the master arc of this story? And I realized it was really quite an epic story that I had dreamed up, and that it was 9 books. And so I found my way to the first book, which is The Illusion of Gravity. And so the premise of these 9 books, starting with The Illusion of Gravity, is based on the journey of an alien race from they're stalled in space, at the edge of space, 1,000 years. So they are basically technologically where we are right now. If you imagine that we're sitting right here and we haven't done anything amazing for another 1,000 years, okay? So they've got orbital manufacturing. They have efficient fission, nuclear fission. They've experimented with fusion power, but it doesn't scale well. And so their alternative for distributed power technology is methane or natural gas converting fuel cells. And so we meet these folks, the Anye, 70,000 years in the past, 3 million light years from Earth, which puts them they're still in the Milky Way galaxy. In fact, if it wasn't for celestial interference with dust clouds and other things, we'd be able to see them. And so they're sort of champing at the bit. They're saying, where's our flying cars? Where's our endless power? When are we going to solve all our problems? When are we going to stop having crime and not have war anymore? And so and then they're in a there are, in science fiction, there are these standard tropes. When you're writing a book, you have to introduce some kind of existential threat, or for the master narrative, you need something that could end it all. And typically in science fiction, it's a explosion of the sun or something like that. And I thought, well, I'd really like to stake out my own territory with this. And so being a physics enthusiast, I thought about it a long time, and I looked into what happens to a sun as it ages. And one of the things that a sun does is it color shifts. It starts to turn blue, and it's using up its fuel. And so I thought, well, we can sort of have the threat of a nova without actually having a nova. And wouldn't it be a cool thing if they think they're about to be destroyed by a nova and it never happens? And yet they take measures to try and to make their civilization survive. And so that was one of the premises that I had when I started writing Illusion of Gravity. And so you meet these people, the Anye, and they've been So their crisis, their existential crisis, is actually population crisis. Their sun is turning blue, and it's upsetting their diurnal rhythms, and their population is plunging. And so it goes, in 800 years, it goes from 6 billion to 1.5 billion. And so they're sitting there, what's going to happen to us? And they try to mitigate their fertility crisis with gene tailoring. And so they noticed that and this particular race, the Anye, are descended from the lemur branch of the primate tree. And but throughout their history, they're a modern evolved species, so they look pretty much like us. And they say, well, you know what? The tree lemurs are not having any problems with reproduction. So what if we wake up the tree lemur in our DNA, and maybe we'll start having babies again? So they do that. They use a virus to introduce a DNA altering string into their biology. And it's an experiment, and they think, well, we'll try it and see if it works. Well, the virus turns out to be transmissible and not only by serum. And so it spreads over their whole planet. And in a couple of years, their babies start being born with claws and fangs and fur. Okay.
Big mistake.
So people ask me, why do your characters look like animals? They look like lemurs. And at the time when I was developing the concept, I really wasn't trying to have a main character that was so different from us, but it sort of evolved from the idea of, what would you do if your population was decreasing, and what kind of things would you try? And I thought, well, gosh, and then what could go wrong? And the thing, of course, that can go wrong is that you can roll your evolution back 1 million years by accident. And so that's, if you look at the covers of my books and you see that these are all furry people, I'm not trying to appeal to enthusiasts. And, I know there are people that are really interested in fiction that centers around anthropomorphic furry persons. Okay, I was not even aware of that when I was writing these books, and so and it created some complications as far as finding an artist, because I've got furry people on the covers of all the books, and boy, it was a character, from an artistic viewpoint, character development as far as coming up with a visual concept for what they look like was really quite a challenge. And I found an artist in Romania, a wonderful man named Paul Treef, who'd never done anything like it before, and but he's a digital artist, and in fact, if we had a way for me to do a slideshow from here, I'd show you some of the covers. But he's done some wonderful things with those characters, and so at any rate, so that's kind of where it starts with the illusion of gravity. 1,000 years. They're stalled at the edge of space. They're still driving around on cars with wheels. They have some advancements, superconducting technology for electric motors. Their version of Alexa and Google is marginally smarter than ours, but not a whole lot. There's so many, the tropes about artificial intelligence becoming self-aware. I don't do that at all in the books. Oh, there you go. Sure. So that's Resilient. That's the third book. And those two characters there are Subandava and his adopted mother's boss, standing in a town on the planet Vidura. And if you look at the cover, you see in the background there's there's a cafe in the background, and there's a neon sign with a coffee cup, and underneath it is Sanskrit lettering, and that Sanskrit lettering says coffee.
Oh, cool.
Okay, so that's an Easter egg, right?
Good
so,
one.
I've done an awful lot of gags, I guess you might call them, with these books. I had to decide on what the root language is, and I picked Sanskrit. And the reason I picked Sanskrit is because it is not just one of the oldest known written languages on Earth, but it is a phonetic language, and actually writing Sanskrit, you can write any dialect, any language with Sanskrit Devanagari script. So, but I decided early on that where this series was going was, of course, they would eventually get to Earth, and in fact they do so in the later books, and they arrive during the Ice Age, during our last Ice Age, 25,000 years ago. And it's kind of ironic. They're fleeing from a dying world that never dies. And so they send almost 1 million people out in 20 large spaceships. And by the time they're halfway here, they have discovered how to refuel their sun, and nothing happens. Everything's fine, okay? But they're stuck. And so they get to Earth during our last Ice Age, and in this series, they're disheartened. They're saying, "Oh my God, we've been in space for 5 years. We ran into a hostile enemy. We had to put down a rebellion. It's terrible. And then we arrive on this planet, which is supposed to be our salvation, and there's already people here, and it's theirs, and we can't take it." And so they arrive with mankind. They arrive with 901,000 souls on board, and there are 800,000 humans on Earth, and they're stuck with a real moral decision here. Now, mind you, so I've made some assumptions that a civilization that holds itself together as long as these people will have developed a firm moral basis for their actions. And so they arrive on Earth, and there's 800,000 humans, and we're not making it. And they need a place to live. And there's 900,000 of them. And so the decision they make is to dig coal and carry it out to us so we can make it. So that's a book that's not been completely written yet. So what happened? I wrote the first 3 books, which are the Anye Legacy books, and this talks about their technological revolution when the Anye finally unlocked the secrets of time and matter and universe, and prepare to go into interstellar space. Those are the 3 books: Anye Legacy, The Illusion of Gravity, Quantum Soul, and Resilient. And then the next trilogy, which continues the story, is the Migration Trilogy. That's 3 books, and that's their trip from Vidura, their home planet, to Earth. And then the last 3 books are the Ajavati Trilogy, which starts in 1928 South Dakota. And so you come into the setting there, and the Anye have been here for 25,000 years, and we have no idea. Okay, so they've been here since the last Ice Age, 25,000 years ago. They had not taken any efforts to hide themselves, and so they are the gods of our ancient world. Okay, so they are the Greek gods, the Roman gods, the Hindu gods. They are the Egyptian gods. In particular, Anubis. In the story, Anubis is so they have four ethnic races. Well, 8, but it's actually 4 major divisions, and one of them is kind of canine in appearance, and they are the Kopim. And so in the story, Anubis, the Egyptian god, the Canine god Anubis, was actually a Copine named Sharman Bizal, and his friends called him Anu, and the Egyptians called him Anubis, Anu Bizal, Anubis, and he was a winemaker, and he was just hanging out with the Egyptian court, and the Egyptians were, the Egyptian royalty was like, okay, well, we have aliens from outer space, and they're okay, and we get along with them, so and so kind of what happens in that long period, eventually mankind gets to be an annoyance to them. And so around the time of Jesus, they said, you know what, we're just going to have to hide out. So they have prepared a colony planet, terraformed a colony planet, and all the furry people move and they leave Earth, and leaving behind their business interests. And they have, in the process, taken tens of thousands of humans into their clans. And so this creates the Ajavati constituency. So we have the furry aliens, and we have humans who are citizens of another society, a secret Earth society. Okay. So you come into 1928 South Dakota, and we have that story starts with Dr. Albert Holland Harrison, 83 years old. And he is in Black Rock, South Dakota, and he's waiting to die. And he's living with his 57-year-old daughter. And unbeknownst to him, 20 miles north is a dude ranch in the mountains. And the dude ranch caters to alien visitors from another planet. And it's the Lazy L Ranch. And the Lazy L Ranch features calf roping lessons and trail rides and steak dinners. And they have a world famous restaurant so we've got, in 1928, about 10 million human Ajavati citizens living and working on Earth. And they have all their technology with them, and they keep it undercover. And we have no idea, for the most part, that they're there. And but it's getting harder and harder because Earth is getting more crowded, and we have airplanes, and so these are kind of the last days for the Lazy L Ranch. And so in the story, and I hope I'm not giving too much away, but what the heck? In the story, Albert Harrison is living in Black Rock at the end of his career as a physician, and with his daughter, and they have boarders, and the boarders are a woman who was a refugee from the Great War in Europe, arrived in 1918 with her 4-year-old son, and moved in with Doc and his daughter. Unbeknownst to him, she is his daughter from 1863 Battle of Chickamauga, when he was a surgeon's helper in the Confederate Army. And her and her mother and her mother's parents were on a humanitarian mission, dragging a chuck wagon around, feeding Confederate soldiers. So that's, so I'm kind of bouncing back and forth here, but it's a big story. Yeah, just this one book is a big story. It's 87,000 words long, and the excised document, the chapters that I took out to make it actually readable, is 53,000 words. Okay, so there's a ton of material that I set aside to kind of streamline the narrative. But so I had there's a very nice man named Ashley Manning. He's an author in England. I think he lives in Manchester. And so he's read several of my books, and he agreed to read Albert when it was in pre-publication mode. And he had read Illusion of Gravity previously and wrote me a lovely review. And one of the things he did was tell me what I was doing, because, that's kind of, I think, a struggle for every author, especially when you start to think about developing your story brand, trying to explain to readers what it is about your writing that would make them want to read the book. and try to do that in 30 words or less, that requires you to really do some thinking, and it's terribly hard for the author to be objective about it. Um, and I didn't really wrestle with this until just recently, because writing is an activity for me. I'm not trying to make a living at it. I'm not trying to become famous. I just wanted a hobby that would stimulate me in a way, and not fill my life with a lot of objects. And as you three well know, writing is a therapeutic experience, or it can be. It can be cathartic. It can be a way to stimulate your emotions and to think about things and to take another look at your own life while you're writing about your fictional character's life. So there have been so many ways that writing for the last 10 years has been rewarding enough that I really hadn't thought about really trying to sell any books until I wrote Albert. And then I looked at it and I said, oh, well, gee, I don't know that the author deserves any attention for this, but I think the work might deserve it. And so I've kind of immersed myself the last 4 or 5 months in various author services, different people who try to help you kind of focus on what it is that you need to do to sell your books. And the idea of story brand came up. And so getting back to Ashley Manning, one of the things he said was that I'm writing family drama. And I've always known that I've been writing stories in which science fiction is the backdrop. It's not the star of the show. So it's not ray guns and rocket ships. It's about life. It's about people. It's about relationships. And I knew that about what I was doing, but I had never put a word to it. And Ashley Manning said, well, it's action and adventure and family drama. And I thought, oh my God, I'm writing soap opera. I'm writing science fiction soap opera. Holy cow. Who knew? I didn't know. Nobody told me. And then so I went back and reread my own book, and I realized, it could be 70% family drama. I mean, honestly, and people, I've sold 100 books, given away 600 books. So I've had some feedback from readers who are people who don't know me, mm-hmm. and listen to the things they said about the books. And you worry when you turn a book out, turn it loose, you look back at it, and you have temptation to author's remorse, and you say, well, was I descriptive enough, or was there enough excitement in the book, or is the first chapter too slow, too dull? Is the climax strong enough? Is the big wind up? Am I following the 3-act form faithfully enough to get by with master storyteller's craft on this one? And then you have people say, oh my God, I couldn't put it down. And what am I supposed to think about that? I guess it's good, if people say that. But you also have to understand that every book is not for every reader. Some people will be disappointed that there's not a cartoon explosion every 3 chapters. But I think there's a place in the literature for the kind of material I'm writing. It's about, if I was to look at underlying themes, it's about facing life with nobility and courage and compassion and sacrifice. And I almost hate to say morality plays, because a lot of people don't understand what a morality play is. but some of the greatest literature in the history of man are morality plays, and you go back to the journeys of Ulysses, and you go back to Homer and Steinbeck and Hemingway and all the really important authors, and a lot of their work is morality plays. It's about how to overcome life's challenges and become a whole person. And sitting here really looking back at the body of what I've written, even including Silken Thread, the adventure love story, I realize that really that's what I've been doing. I've been writing stories about what it takes to build a successful life and become a whole person. And so, obviously I've written, I've published science fiction novels. I've got now 4 published, a 5th on the way, and I've published the adventure love story, which came out of a writing exercise. So I went back to college to learn to be a writer. I wrote 187,000 word book that was, your first book is generally terrible, right? And it was, but it had some good ideas. It had some good material in it. And I thought, well, if I'm going to actually make anything of this, I'm going to have to learn about the writer's craft. So I enrolled in a couple of 300 series, or junior level creative writing classes at a nearby university. And the first thing they made me do was write poetry, which I had absolutely no interest in at all. But from writing poetry, I discovered that, oh my God, you have to be so concise. You have to express all of all of the emotion and all of the information that you want to transmit to the reader in 20 lines, maybe 8, 10 words long each line. You've got to do the whole thing. And it really taught me some important lessons. And then we got into the second half and we got into prose. And we were instructed to write a short story of 22 pages or less. And all I had was science fiction material, and I had a feeling that the instructor wasn't going to be crazy about reading science fiction. So I thought, well, what else could I possibly come up with? I don't have any other stories in my head. And so I was raised in the Philippines. We moved there in 1956. And so I was 6 years old, and I went grades 1 through 12 at an international school in the Philippines. And we traveled all around the world. I visited 29 countries before I came back to the U.S. and settled when I was 18. So I've seen a lot of things and met a lot of people. And so when I was 17 years old, I was on a business trip with my dad to Tokyo, and we had a family friend, one of my dad's business associates. His name was Henry Tang, and he was a quite successful businessman from Taiwan who had a house in Manila. And so we met him in Tokyo, and he was going to introduce my dad to some mid-level executives from Matsushita Electric. And so we had dinner at the Hotel New Otani in Tokyo. And Uncle Henry was eating, I'll never forget this moment. He was eating escargot. And he says to me, "So, John, you decide what you do when you go to college?" And I said, "No, sir, I have not." He says, "I tell what you do. You learn speak Chinese while you still living in Manila. You go to States, become an engineer like your father. You come back, I make you my partner." All right. So I'm 17, and I had absolutely no understanding of the world. And so we left dinner, and then we went to another hotel where Dad met 4 mid-level executives from Matsushita Electric who tried to drink him under the table. And my dad was a second generation, he's my stepfather, Alan Mori Rozovsky. He was a second generation Russian immigrant Jew, and he could drink like nobody you ever met. And these guys could, at the end of the evening, they had their jackets off and their ties loosened, and they were sweating profusely. And my dad was as dapper and composed as you can imagine. He had matched them drink for drink. So we get on the elevator, and the elevator doors close, and my dad puts his arms around my shoulders and he says, "Son, you're going to have to help me." So, but he never said anything about what Henry Tang said to me. So fast forward to 1999, and my parents are in their 80s, and we moved them to the town where we live, and my dad's 85, and I said, "Dad, do you remember 1967 when Henry Tang said, you know, you learn to speak Chinese and you come back to Manila as an engineer, and I'll make you my partner?" And my dad says, "Oh yeah, I remember that. Henry asked my permission before he said that to you." And I said, "Really?" And I said, "You never said a thing to me about it." He says, "No, I did not." And I said, "Well, Dad, what would have happened if I had taken Henry Tang up on his offer?" And my dad says, "Henry Tang would have made you a very rich man." And I thought, well, there's got to be more to it than that. He says, "Yeah, well," he says, "here's the deal. You know, Henry's Chinese, and he would have treated you like his son, because he didn't have a son. He had one daughter. He would have treated you like his son, and you would have been expected to obey him. And he would have married you off to an influential family in Taiwan for business reasons." And so the end game on this deal is you have a Chinese wife in Taiwan, you'll have a Filipino mistress in Manila, and you'll have a European mistress in Sydney, Australia, which is where Henry was going to send you to be his sales engineer. And I said, "Well, that doesn't sound so bad." And my dad said, "Well, that's not the life I wanted for you." And so, you know, I'm asked to write a short story, and I thought, well, I'll just write that scene, you know. And so I did, and everybody in the class loved it. You know, we went around, and people said, "Well, what's the rest of the story?" I said, "No, that's all I have." You know, we parted, and I didn't take the bait, and so I thought, well, after quite a bit of encouragement, I thought, well, okay, I could write the story. So what happens if the young man in the story takes the bait? And so that's what Silken Thread is. And okay, so and it was in a way an easy book for me to write, because you know, it's where I'm from. You know, 1966 Asia is where the book starts. I know that landscape. I lived there, and you know, so a whole lot of the people in the book, the really colorful characters in the book, they're real people. They're people, you know, that I know. You know, there were 50,000 Americans living in the Philippines when I was there in the 1960s. Dad was an important man. He was a manager of transmission and distribution at Manila Electric Company. The company paid for all of our country club memberships. We had gone from being kind of poor in Flintstone, Georgia, when my stepfather told my mother, who was widowed, you know, we got to get married because I'm taking you and the boys to the Philippines. So, you know, it was a big change of life for us, but I was 6. I barely knew who I was, right? So basically, I woke up in the Philippines as a rich man's son. And so the expat.
John, I'm just gonna cut in here now. I see we're at the end of the show already. It's
are we really? I thought I wasn't going to have enough to say.
it's really flown by. That's awesome. I love that story about the Philippines and everything else. That was great.
That is really fascinating. You turn that into a whole book. Also, it's almost like an alternate history for like your life or something. It's a really cool idea.
Yeah, well, it came, and I'm really proud of the book, and I've had some very enthusiastic readers.
So
that's great.
So what's the next book coming out?
The next book is Ghosts of Ancient Vidura.
And that's a sequel to
Albert.
Okay, awesome. And when's that coming out?
I would suspect January or February.
So it's coming out fairly shortly then, yeah. And yeah. Albert just released in October, correct?
Correct.
And if readers tuning in, if they want to find your books, where can they find them?
Well, of course, they can go to johndyrwrites.com, and there's links to all my books and all my essays. I've been writing essays on WordPress going on 6 years now. So I've got probably 60 essays or so of all kinds of different musings and topics, and some of them are pretty good, and some of them are just so-so. They're I've got a series called Camera Familia, which is about,
sorry, John. We're just trying to find out where you can get them. So you can get them on WordPress. You can get them on Amazon.
Right.
Now,
so,
are you exclusive to Amazon other than that? Or?
Yeah, I'm exclusive to Amazon.
Okay. And we've got your website going across the bottom there. So I just want to thank you for coming on the show. I'm not trying to cut you off here, but
well, no, I've had a great time, and the time just
it's really flown by for sure. So before we leave, I just want to introduce next week's guest, and I think Dave must have something, some kind of poll in the background here, because we keep having science fiction authors in here lately. So next week's guest is science fiction author Rachel Lulich, and I might be saying her name wrong, but that wouldn't be the first time. Rachel is a former Air Force cryptologic linguist who now writes space adventures full of surprising details, relatable characters, and page-turning excitement. So that sounds like another guest for Dave. I think Christy and I are just going to have to go off and do our own show and let Dave do this one on his own.
Turn off our cameras. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. I had a great time.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks.
So for Christy, Dave, John, and myself, we wish everyone to have an amazing week ahead. And until we meet again, take good care. Bye-bye, everybody.